General Hospital spoilers for reveal that Sasha had spent countless days trying to hold herself together for the sake of Daisy. Projecting calm and stability while her world quietly crumbled behind her eyes. The trauma of her past, the death of her first child, her battles with addiction. The loss of Brando had never truly left her. It had simply been tucked into a corner of her soul that she never dared revisit. But now, as Daisy's safety came under threat from forces Sasha couldn't control, everything she had worked so hard to suppress began clawing its way back to the surface, threatening to consume her all over again. The hospital room that had once represented healing and rebirth now felt like a prison, filled with whispers of judgment and ghosts of past pain. She tried to remain composed when Michael told her they were increasing security, when Sonny reassured her that no one would touch Daisy. But deep down Sasha felt the fear metastasizing into something far more destructive, guilt. A dark, gnawing guilt that whispered to her in the dead of night, telling her that no matter how many times she tried to start over, danger always followed her, and it would always land on the ones she loved the most. She found herself watching Daisy sleep with trembling hands, unable to look away. Terrified that closing her eyes for even a moment might mean missing the second when someone slipped into the room and took her away. Every creak of the floor, every vibration of her phone, every hushed voice in the hallway made her flinch. She began to snap at the nurses, at Michael, even at Willow when she offered to help. No one could understand what it was like to carry the weight of so much loss while pretending to be strong. No one could understand the absolute panic of knowing that Daisy had already been the target once and could be again. But the more Sasha tried to warn others, the more they insisted she was overreacting, paranoid, unstable. The ghosts of her past, the ones she had tried so hard to bury, were now being weaponized against her by those who thought they were helping. Take a break, they said. You need rest, they said. But all Sasha heard was their unspoken fear, that maybe she wasn't fit to be a mother after all. Sidwell had made his move already, his shadow looming behind the chaos. He wasn't just a manipulator of power or money, he was a surgeon of psychological weakness, dissecting every vulnerability he could find. And Sasha, fragile and shaken, had become the perfect pawn in whatever twisted strategy he was unfolding. Michael tried to shield her, but Sasha could sense it, that he no longer saw her as the fierce, resilient woman she once was. He saw her as a ticking time bomb, a potential liability, someone who might not hold it together long enough to keep Daisy safe. That quiet shift in Michael's demeanor broke something in Sasha. If even he was starting to question her ability to protect her daughter, what chance did she have? The decision didn't come suddenly, but rather settled into her bones with aching inevitability. She couldn't stay. Not here. Not in a city where every shadow felt like a threat and every ally felt like a potential betrayer. Sasha began preparing in silence. Folding Daisy's clothes with trembling hands, writing a letter to Sonny she would never send, one where she tried to explain that this wasn't abandonment, it was survival. She knew how it would look. How people would accuse her of running, of breaking down again, but this time, Sasha wasn't running from herself. She was running for her daughter. Because she had seen the pattern too many times. Every time she tried to fight back against the darkness, it swallowed someone she loved. She wouldn't let Daisy be next. The night she slipped out of General Hospital, Daisy nestled in a soft blanket against her chest. There were no goodbyes. She left the room untouched, as if they had only stepped out for a walk. But her eyes burned with the knowledge that she might never return. As she stepped into the darkness of the parking lot, her heart thundered in her chest, but for the first time in days, she felt clarity. There was no more pretending. She was no longer just Sasha, the woman who smiled through pain, who nodded when told to rest, who tried to fit into the box of what a recovered woman was supposed to be. She was a mother. And mothers didn't wait for danger to strike. They struck first. Jason found the note 2 hours later, placed under the corner of the crib like a secret confession. It wasn't detailed. Sasha hadn't explained who she suspected or where she was going. She had only written one thing: if you love Daisy, don't come after me. Just make sure they never find her." It was a chilling message that sent a ripple of alarm through the Corinthos family. Sonny slammed his fists against the desk when he heard. Michael sat in stunned silence, clutching one of Daisy's toys. Willow, hearing the news, collapsed into a chair, her emotions a tangle of guilt and understanding. She had watched Sasha unravel and done nothing. And now, Daisy was gone. But perhaps the most haunting part of it all was the possibility that Sasha was right. That somewhere in the halls of Port Charles, in the whispers of courtroom deals and behind the smiling faces of people who claimed to love her, someone was waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. And if they could get Daisy, they could get to the very heart of everything that mattered. The family scrambled into motion, calls to private investigators. Surveillance footage pulled from every hospital hallway, Sonny activating every contact he had from Albany to Florida. But Sasha had learned from her past. This time, she had made sure there would be no digital trail. No hotel reservations, no credit card swipes, no friends called for favors. She had erased herself with surgical precision. The press began to buzz within hours. Sasha Corbin disappears with daughter, mental breakdown or protective instinct? The headline stung. But none more than the rumors that started circulating online that maybe Sasha had finally broken beyond repair. Some even whispered that she might be a threat to Daisy herself. Michael refused to believe that. He knew Sasha. Knew her love for Daisy was fierce, primal, something that went beyond sanity or stability. But the world didn't care about nuance. The world liked clean narratives, the tragic mother who snapped, the hero father fighting to find his child. But none of those roles fit. The deeper Jason dug, the more he began to uncover something darker, a network of falsified medical documents, encrypted bank transfers, and a trail of whispers connecting Sidwell to several powerful players who seemed invested in erasing Sasha's credibility. It wasn't just about Daisy anymore. It was about something bigger. Something designed to cripple Sonny's family from the inside. And Sasha had unknowingly walked right into the middle of it. But maybe, just maybe, she had also walked out in time. Because what they all failed to remember was that Sasha wasn't just a victim. She had been broken before. And survived. She had lost everything. And rebuilt. And this time, she wasn't alone. She had Daisy in her arms. And every mile she put between herself and Port Charles was one more mile of defiance, one more mile of love, one more mile of rage turned into resolve. And if they ever came for her again, they would learn the hard way that there was nothing more dangerous than a mother who had nothing left to lose. Under the crushing weight of threats, betrayals, and emotional torment, Sasha finally reaches a breaking point, one that shatters the fragile illusion of safety she had clung to since Daisy's birth. The walls are closing in. She no longer sleeps soundly, no longer trusts the silence of the night or the echo of Michael's promises. The whispers about Sidwell's dark intentions. The veiled manipulations behind courtrooms and custody battles, and the growing instability surrounding Michael himself have left her in a constant state of alarm. The once beautiful vision of a peaceful life for Daisy has become a battlefield littered with secrets, legal traps, and emotional landmines. And so, in a moment of painful clarity, Sasha does what few mothers could find the strength to do. She decides to let go in order to save her child. By signing over guardianship of Daisy to Jason, Sasha is not giving up. She is, instead, making the most heartbreaking and courageous decision of her life. This isn't about trust in the system. She knows that system has failed her too many times to count. It's about trust in one man. Jason, silent yet resolute, has stood in the background of this chaos like a ghost of conscience. He has always protected without fanfare, without demand. Where others posture and scheme, Jason simply acts, and Sasha knows deep in her soul that if anyone can protect Daisy from the shadows forming around her, it's him. The legal paperwork is signed in silence. Sasha doesn't cry. Not then. There are no dramatic declarations, no courtroom outbursts, just the sound of a pen dragging across paper, the final thread in a maternal bond stretched to the edge. But the pain is unbearable. When she returns to the Quartermain estate, she finds Daisy asleep, clutching a stuffed animal that still smells like her. Sasha sits at the edge of the crib and finally lets the tears fall. Knowing that what she did was right, but also knowing that her arms will never again feel quite full without the weight of her daughter. Michael is blindsided. When he learns that Sasha has relinquished guardianship to Jason, his rage is volcanic. To him, this isn't just betrayal, it's annihilation. In his mind, Sasha has taken away his daughter. His identity, his entire reason for fighting. He storms into Jason's residence, demanding explanations, threatening legal action, and throwing accusations like daggers. But Jason says nothing. He doesn't need to. His presence alone is a wall Michael cannot breach, a calm that stands in brutal contrast to Michael's unraveling. Carly tries to mediate. But even she sees something in Michael now that terrifies her. This isn't grief. This isn't heartbreak. It's obsession, and it's growing darker by the day. She turns to Sunny, who silently agrees that the lines have been crossed and that perhaps Sasha is not wrong for removing Daisy from the chaos. Sunny, torn between father and grandfather, watches his son spiral and questions if there is any part of the boy he once raised still left behind those cold, furious eyes. Meanwhile, Nina is horrified to realize that her meddling may have contributed to this mess. Her attempts to insert herself into Willow's family dynamics, her manipulation of truths, and her desperation to heal the rift between her daughters have only added fuel to a fire she can no longer control. She watches Sasha walk away with a dignity born of pure maternal love and begins to see herself for what she's become, a woman clinging to the shards of a family broken beyond repair. And then there's Willow. Though still reeling from her own unraveling, she watches from a distance as Sasha makes the ultimate sacrifice. It awakens something inside her, an understanding that motherhood is not about possession, but protection. Willow's own pain has made her question her instincts, her choices, and the world around her. But watching Sasha put Daisy above all else reminds her of what she must do, face her truth, even if it means walking away from everything she thought she wanted. As the dust begins to settle, the town starts to whisper. What does this mean for the Corinthos legacy? For the Quartermains? For Daisy herself? Questions swirl like smoke over a battlefield. Is Jason truly the safest guardian? Or will the shadows that follow him now endanger the girl he's sworn to protect? Will Michael rise from this defeat or descend further into a madness shaped by entitlement and loss? And most frightening of all, has Sasha's act of courage sparked a war none of them are prepared to fight? Because in Port Charles, nothing ends with a signature. Nothing is ever final. Behind every choice lies a deeper consequence. And for Sasha, Michael, Jason, and Daisy, the story is just beginning, one where love demands sacrifice, truth shatters illusions. And even the most heroic acts can ignite the deadliest storms. Of all the storms that had ever touched Port Charles, none were as quiet, as chilling, or as irreversible as the disappearance of Sasha. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply vanished, slipping away under the cover of nightfall with a single, unshakable purpose, to protect her daughter, Daisy, from the chaos that surrounded them both. But what Sasha could never have predicted was that her absence would become the earthquake that cracked the already fragile foundation of those left behind, especially Michael. Her vanishing was not just a retreat. It was an act of maternal sacrifice, of desperate preservation, and, ultimately, a trigger that unleashed a chain reaction of unraveling control, shifting loyalties, and psychological collapse. Michael had always hovered between heroism and obsession, between protector and controller. But when Sasha handed over guardianship of Daisy to Jason before vanishing, it felt like betrayal. It felt like annihilation. How could she choose someone else to raise their daughter? How could she trust Jason more than the father of her child? Those questions, burning, festering, consumed Michael as the walls around him began to tighten, suffocating him in the silence Sasha left behind. The Michael of yesterday, the rational executive, the dutiful son, the partner holding his fractured family together, began to dissolve. In his place emerged a man teetering on the edge of something far darker. His anger was not immediate, it seeped in slowly, creeping through his veins like poison. First came the paranoia. The fear that everyone had known Sasha was planning to leave. Then the resentment, that Jason hadn't warned him, hadn't fought to keep Sasha grounded. Then came the rage, raw, unfiltered. Directed at everyone who didn't understand his pain. Michael began accusing Carly of manipulating Sasha's emotions. He stormed into meetings with Jason, demanding to know where Sasha had gone. He refused to speak to Willow, blaming her for not seeing the signs, for not fighting harder for their family to remain intact. To Michael, everyone had failed him. And worse, they had failed Daisy. But it wasn't just Michael's behavior that changed. His very soul began to rot under the weight of abandonment. He could no longer sleep without reliving the moment he realized Sasha was gone. He imagined every possible outcome: Sasha being hunted, Sasha in danger, Sasha holding Daisy in her arms on a train out of town, glancing over her shoulder for fear of being found. The helplessness that followed turned Michael from a grieving father into a vengeful force. He began taking meetings behind closed doors. Rumors swirled through ELQ and the Quartermain mansion that Michael was hiring private investigators, combing through Sasha's bank accounts, surveilling bus stations and airports. Leaving no stone unturned in his growing crusade to reclaim his daughter. But somewhere deep inside that pursuit, Michael lost sight of Daisy. What began as a mission to reunite a family evolved into a vendetta. He didn't just want Sasha found, he wanted her to pay for taking Daisy. He wanted Jason humiliated for accepting guardianship. He wanted control back, and he didn't care who he had to destroy to get it. And the more he fought, the more people turned against him. Carly begged him to let go. Willow wept, pleading for him to focus on healing. Even Dante warned him that this was becoming a war with no rules, no end, and no victors. But Michael didn't hear them. The only voice he listened to was the one screaming inside him, the voice that insisted that Sasha had betrayed him, that Jason had stolen from him. That everyone was conspiring to erase his role as a father. And yet, the more aggressive he became, the more Daisy began to fear the intensity in his eyes during supervised visits. The more Jason started to document the shifts in his tone, the more Sasha's decision looked less like abandonment and more like an act of protection. Meanwhile, somewhere beyond the borders of Port Charles, Sasha existed in fragments. She watched Daisy's video calls with Jason from afar, aching to hold her child, to whisper promises of safety and love. But she knew the shadows that followed them both. She knew what Michael was capable of when he felt threatened. She remembered the control, the possessiveness masked as concern. And she believed, perhaps naively, that if she disappeared, Michael might realize how much his pain had begun to warp him. But she was wrong. Michael wasn't healing. He was hardening. He was becoming the very thing she had feared. And in the quiet corners of the Quartermain estate, there were whispers now, about restraining orders. About custody battles turning into criminal proceedings, about what would happen if Michael's obsession led to something irreversible. He was seen late at night, sitting in Daisy's empty nursery, whispering promises that the world would pay for taking her from him. And so, the lines blurred. Was Michael the victim, or the villain? Was Sasha a runaway, or a savior? The town that once saw Michael as the grieving father now questioned what Daisy's life would have been if Sasha had stayed. Had she done the unthinkable because it was the only choice left? Had she seen something in Michael that even he hadn't yet seen in himself? And still, Sasha remained missing. Still, Michael spiraled. Still, Jason stood between a child's innocence and a father's unraveling. And Port Charles, ever divided, ever whispering, waited with bated breath for the next move. Because this wasn't just a custody battle anymore. This was a war, one born of betrayal, fueled by obsession, and destined to end in either redemption or complete ruin. Sofia Mattson's departure from General Hospital marks a significant and emotionally charged turning point in the soap's current storyline. As her character Sasha Corbin is confirmed to have met a tragic end. After years of anchoring some of the show's most heartbreaking and redemptive arcs. Sasha's death isn't just the conclusion of a character, it's the unraveling of a deeply layered journey that captivated audiences with its pain, resilience, and eventual collapse. Her final storyline, which centered on her desperate attempts to protect her daughter Daisy from mounting threats, began to reflect a woman pushed past the limits of what any mother could endure. From being a grieving widow and struggling addict to a mother trying to survive in a city teeming with betrayal, corruption, and power plays, Sasha was fighting on all fronts, and ultimately, she lost. While the precise details of her exit haven't played out entirely on screen yet, backstage sources confirmed that Mattsson has finished her contractual obligations and opted not to renew. The showrunners, rather than leaving her character open-ended, made the controversial decision to close her arc definitively with death, a decision that will send ripples across multiple existing storylines. Her absence will hit Michael the hardest, as he will now be forced to raise Daisy alone while still in the midst of fierce custody battles and legal turmoil. Willow, too, will feel the loss deeply, especially after their shared bond as mothers and co-defenders of the Corinthos children. Jason, having recently been entrusted with Daisy's safety by Sasha in her final acts of clarity and maternal instinct, is now faced with the haunting responsibility of honoring her last wish. The implications of Sasha's death are far-reaching. It dismantles the fragile balance within Michael's already fractured support system and sets the stage for a darker and more vengeful version of him to emerge. It also leaves Daisy vulnerable, not only to emotional trauma but to the dangerous undercurrents of Port Charles, where enemies like Sidwell and Nellie are circling like vultures. Sasha's death could become the emotional and narrative centerpiece for the fall season of General Hospital, drawing together multiple threads: the exposure of Sidwell's manipulations, Willow's downward spiral, and Jason's internal conflict between justice and vengeance. Moreover, Sofia Mattsson's final scenes are expected to be emotionally devastating, highlighting both her raw talent and the deep affection fans have for her character. There will likely be tributes, flashbacks, and a wave of guilt-fueled confrontations as the truth about what led to her death, and who might be indirectly responsible, comes to light. Whether Sasha was targeted by someone or simply collapsed under the crushing weight of her mental and emotional torment, her death changes everything. It removes one of the few truly good-hearted characters in a sea of morally ambiguous ones, and that absence is bound to affect the tone of the show. Mattson's exit is a loss not only to the cast but to an audience who rooted for Sasha through every setback, every heartbreak, every relapse, and every comeback. Now, with her gone, Port Charles enters a colder, more dangerous chapter, one in which grief may give way to war, alliances may shatter, and long-standing vendettas could reignite with deadly consequences.